Welcome to Roots and Wings, the podcast from the Fox Hill School where we share ideas, insights, and conversations to help your children grow strong and soar high. I'm Melanie Little, and I'm the director at the Fox Hill School. Today, I'm talking with Liz Faria, who is a licensed, independent clinical social worker whose focus is working with the parents of anxious children. She is also an alumni parent at the Fox Hill School. Hi, Liz.
Hi,
Thanks so
Melanie.
much for coming to talk to us.
Thanks for having me.
I thought this would be a great time to talk to you because it is back to school season. And we had our preschool graduation in June, and now our kids are off to kindergarten, which is a big step for families. I'd love to start our conversation there.
Yeah, it's a huge transitional point. I think it's one of the most exciting times for parents of young kids, but it also tends to bring up a lot of anxieties just because the day-to-day changes so much from the preschool kind of structure to being in elementary school. Yeah, it's a big changing point for families for sure.
Absolutely. What do you find are some of the kind of key differences between preschool and kindergarten?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest shifts that for parents is really that you're not aware of what your kids are doing all throughout the day like you are when they're in preschool. So for most parents of preschoolers, you really, really get to know their teachers quite well. You're there at drop-offs, you're there at pickups in person, you're in the building. You're also getting a lot of the times you're getting, either pictures sent home or like a lot of information about the day to day. And there's a market shift when you go into kindergarten. So, kids that are taking the school bus, you might put them onto the bus and then not really have any contact with anyone at the school until a parent teacher night. Even if you're dropping your kids off, you're going to be pulling up your car and they're going to be jumping out of your car like little paratroopers.
in the 10-second drop-off zone.
Characters for life. Yeah. Yep.
It's bringing back all the anxiety, even though my kids are 20.
Yeah, so then your kid
Just talking about.
Yeah, your kid kind of goes off for the day and you're really not privy to knowing the ins and outs of it in the same way. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just a shift for parents. And I think people can be a little bit wary of that at first. There's also just a big change in terms of a play-based day to more of an academic setting, which isn't really necessarily a great thing. I mean, that the shift in terms of kindergarten curriculum has moved heavily toward like academic time, but your
Yeah.
kids having a lot of free play time or just unstructured play gets pretty drastically reduced in kindergarten. It's preschoolers have about 49% of their time spent in free play, and in kindergarten it drops to about 11% of their of their time in free play. So that's a significant drop for a change for kids that can also, families really need to adjust to. So, there's lots of differences, obviously, but those are a couple that, jump out right away.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. And how can parents kind of help the kids prepare for that if they're used to kind of playing all day, so to speak, even though they don't know they're learning? But that transition, if the child is anxious about it or the parents are anxious about that, how can they kind of
Help
muddle
them
through?
along. Yeah. So I think you've got to think of your role as a parent here as you're setting kind of the emotional tone in the house, the emotional tone for your child starting school. So a lot of
The parents are.
the parents are, and kids are going to be, feeling what you're feeling in your house and reacting to that largely. I mean, kindergartners are not going to be nervous because their percentage of time in the day is dropping down for play. They have no idea
Right.
that that's even happening. They're not going to be
Right.
nervous that you're not getting missives sent home about what they're doing all day. They're not even aware of that. So
Okay.
there are changes, but the parents, kind of like expressing a sense of confidence, I guess, that this is a good, healthy change for their kid. And that
Okay.
having that big girl, big boy independence going into the big kid's school and being more autonomous, that's a healthy, exciting thing and not something you need to be fearful around, is going to help
Okay.
set that tone. Some kids are going to be more, obviously, temperamentally, maybe more prone toward feeling shy or anxious. The first few weeks of school, you're going to see a lot of that, even in kids with no anxiety issues. You're going to see kids that are quite, just the new situation is going to bring up nerves for kids. But as parents, you're the instrumental people there in relaying that sense of calm confidence that your kid's going to be just fine. Specifically, I would say if your kid's really having a harder time with that transition or is quite nervous, you you really want to make sure that you're not exacerbating that situation by trying to protect your child from those feelings. Or let's say your child's nervous about getting on the school bus, for
Okay.
example, that you're not going to try to prevent that by escorting your child into the building the first week of school because you think they're going to be nervous without you there. You're trying your
Okay.
best to give that sense that, you're going to be just fine, and you're pushing for that child to take that step. I mean, most kids
Okay.
are going to be able to do that.
Right.
There may be some
And
that
so that whatever the expectation is ultimately, which is get on the bus every day, for example, you don't want to do something different at the
you're going to
beginning.
try not to. Now,
Yeah.
I would say for kindergarten, for the first week or two, are there more parents that are waiting at the drop offs for a few minutes? Yes. And I was one of those with my youngest daughter.
Yes.
And that's not, I mean, that is a age typical thing. So for the first couple of days, I think that's okay. What you don't want to do is set a pattern of that, or really act like it's this huge, you need to make these major modifications going forward for your kid. The first
Okay.
few days is maybe different.
Right.
So I like to talk to parents about what it needs to be anti-fragile. So when we have young kids, we often think of them as fairly fragile, like they're going to get hurt, they're going to get scared, we need to protect them from things. But what it means to be anti-fragile is that you have an ability to improve or gain strength when you're exposed to stressors, uncertainty, failure, mistakes, risk, all age appropriate, of course. And this
Okay.
idea that your child is going to gain strength by taking these steps into uncertain situations where they're going to be encountering things that they're not always comfortable about, things that are stressful for them a little bit,
No.
and that's a positive, not a negative.
Right. Not something that parents need to protect them from or
No,
feel guilty that they have to struggle a little bit or
no, you want them. It's kind of, opposite of how you tend to feel, as parents feel, but they feel like they want to prevent those, their kid from having those experiences or feelings. But
100%.
there's been this work done by a guy named Dr. Camilo Ortiz out of New York. He looks at what he calls the 4 Ds. The four
Okay.
Ds are discomfort, distress, disappointment, and danger, but like mild danger. And
Okay.
when the 4 Ds are really handy for parents like launching their kids into the school year to think about. So the 4 Ds are elements you actively want your kid to encounter over and over again: discomfort, distress, disappointment, and mild danger. And those
And
are
you
all
want them to
you do.
experience.
Yes. And we all
It's the
know
opposite of what you think.
yes. You think you don't want your kid to have those things. But
100%.
what we find is that the kids that learn to tolerate those 4 Ds are much better equipped longer term to be resilient kids, to be less anxious, to be less fragile, and just generally more competent and sturdy type of kids, which is what you're really trying to build. So
Okay.
I think it's like handy. I try to like remember. It's like if you see a situation where your kid's going to hit one of the 4 Ds, like they're feeling some distress at the drop off, or
Yeah.
they're playing with older kids at the playground, and you see fifth graders roughhousing, and you're now little kindergartners out there with fifth graders, and you sensing that that's some mild danger. Your job is not to run in and stop that thing, unless it's
Okay.
really, obviously this is, you don't want
Lots
him
of
running
danger.
into traffic
Yes. Yes.
is above
Yes.
mild danger. But you do want those things, you see your kid being excluded from a game at there's like maybe there's an after school barbecue the first week back, and you see your kids excluded from some activity, and you feel this like that they're feeling disappointed or distressed, and you want to go fix it. You're trying to catch yourself and note that those experiences are cumulative within proportion to lots of other positive things, are what helps your kid actually become much more sturdy and be much better equipped to deal with school successfully in life.
So going through them themselves
Mhm.
with and see how they do,
Yep.
that's that's building their confidence because they did it themselves.
It's letting them manage those stressors with you as kind of a backdrop of support, but you not putting yourself front and center trying to mitigate what's happening, to change what's happening. You can still be obviously a comforting adult presence, and if your kid is
Yeah.
stressed about something, they can talk to you about it, or you can help them process it. But you're not trying to stop all those experiences.
Right. So afterward, you can be the sounding board
Mhm.
if they say, "Oh, I didn't like it when they didn't let me play with them."
Yeah.
You can talk through it with them, but you didn't stop them from experiencing what it feels like to be excluded.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think a really important thing for parents to understand, like, so I work with parents of particularly anxious kids.
Okay.
This would be but I think this is important for probably all parents to kind of understand. But if you're looking at childhood anxiety, and again, this isn't just at the start of the school year, but a lot of this is going to come up at the start of the school year because it's such a
Right.
big changing point. When adults are anxious, you know how it feels to be an adult who's anxious about something. But if you're
Yeah.
a child, it's a very different, it's very, very different process happening. If a child is anxious, what happens is the child triggers in their parent a response. And when you get when you get problems here is when the child's anxiety triggers a parent to basically become over responsive and overprotective because they want to shield their child from that feeling. And that's a normal
Yes.
it's a normal thing parents do. And that's how parents are equipped physiologically, biologically to want to
Evolution.
yeah, to protect their kids from those feelings. But
Yes.
parents need to understand is some of that normal anxiety, a parent trying to over respond to it is going to aggravate the situation for the child and make it
Okay.
more sticky rather than something the kid could have really worked through more successfully without you doing that.
Interesting. So sometimes it's not just the child has anxiety, the child's feeding off the parent who might have anxiety, and it kind of goes back and forth.
Yes, that's definitely true. And that's true. And also just that the child's anxiety trips off the parental response of overprotectionism. And that becomes a problem for tons of families. If you have a kid who's prone anxious, you're
Yeah.
almost definitely going to run into that problem because that's the normal pattern families get into.
Okay.
So,
And so, what is kind of a not that you can wrap it up and put a bow on it, but what can parents do as they know they're just taking this going back to school at really any age into consideration? What can parents do themselves to help their kids through these times without doing it for them, so to speak?
yeah, so I think there's a couple things. You can acknowledge if your kid's having a hard time. So you're not saying, "Oh, this is easy, just suck it up." It's not that kind of messaging. So you can definitely acknowledge if your kid is struggling or nervous, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
your messaging should be around acknowledging that feeling and relaying a sense of confidence in your child. That's one part. That's the emotional kind of like feeling you're trying to give off here. But on the other part of this is what you're not going to do is be making these major changes in your own behavior as a parent that are they're called accommodations. You don't want to accommodate for a child to prevent them from feeling that feeling. So an example would be your child makes some new friends in their kindergarten class. They really want to have a play date, but you know that your child gets nervous at people's houses, so you
Yeah.
only want to host play dates at your own house, and you don't
Oh,
want your child to go to a play date somewhere else. And you're not thinking of that as an accommodation, but you're just thinking like, oh, I know, Joey will be more comfortable at home having a play date. I'll invite kids here. There's nothing
right.
wrong with inviting kids over, but if you know that the reason you're doing that is to prevent your child from going through that kind of growing process and feeling that anxiety, and that's why you're doing it, you have to be really cautious of that. You really want to encourage your child to be able to move through the discomfort that they're feeling.
Yeah.
That could be with all kinds of things. That could be for an older kid, maybe a child like forgets their doesn't finish their assignment and your instinct is to email their teacher to say, oh, they had a really rough night, just give them a little break today. That's you making you're trying to prevent that one of the 4 Ds there, discomfort, distress. You're trying to prevent that from happening. And so you're
I
making
may
an
have done this.
accommodation to you're changing something about your behavior to
Yeah.
stop that experience. And what you're trying to remember, no matter what age your kid is that you're better served to let your kid have that experience than you are the empathetic, like sounding board, to talk to your kid about these kind of things, not to troubleshoot for them, but to listen to them. And that you have confidence that they can resolve their issue or they can work through what they're challenged by. And then you're letting them kind of face those challenges as they come. And again, that doesn't not just for kindergartners, that's for any age and really any age kid. It's just that the variables are going to change
Yes.
around what kind of problems the kids are running into.
100%.
Yep.
I'm listening to you thinking my kids are going off to college and I'm going to incorporate these things still. So sounds like a lifetime
Yeah,
of
it
advice.
is. And like your kid can always, you have to remember that kids, their brains are always they're this the idea of neuroplasticity, which is important to understand that your kids neural pathways are being changed through their experiences, and not accommodations or avoidance or things that you're trying to avoid that for your child. They need to go through lots of experiences in order to basically wire themselves up properly to handle all the stressors they're going to face in school, and in the world. But I know we're
And in
talking
the world.
about school, but in general, that's what you're trying to get them to that point. So it's a long process. It's like growing up is a lot of years of working with your kids, and at every step of the way they're going to hit these challenges, and
Yeah.
you're their kind of you're their safe anchor there, but
Yeah.
you're not their manager.
Yes. That's a good way to think of it.
Yeah. So
Wow. Well, this has been amazing. Just listening that it happens at all ages, whether you have a preschooler starting school, a kindergarten starting school, or even college kids going back to school. This has been awesome. You provided me with some links that are helpful resources that I will put in our show notes so parents can access them, that talk a little bit more about some of these topics.
yep. And if there's a way to link to if there's my website's just Liz Faria, LICSW. But if you're having
Oh, great.
any challenges, like more specifically, or if any of the parents that are listening feel like they need more direct help with their own situation, in Massachusetts, I work with families in Massachusetts. So
Oh, wonderful. That is great. Well, I would love to. I feel like we could talk for a really long time, but we'll stop for now. But hopefully, I would love to invite you back another time and we can talk about another
for
topic.
sure. Thanks, Melanie.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, thank you for listening to Roots and Wings from the Fox Hill School. For more resources and upcoming episodes, visit foxhill-school.com. See you next time. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Melanie.